Number 9. The Endurance. Between the years 1901 and 1917, a famous polar explorer named Sir Ernest Shackleton led 3 separate expeditions down to Antarctica. In 1914, he and his crew left on what would become their final journey aboard the 3-masted wooden ship known as the Endurance. Almost immediately after leaving South Georgia Island for the Weddell Sea, they met some serious problems. It all started when the crew was slowed down by sea ice, and things only got worse from there until the ship was ultimately trapped in an ice floe. At first, Shackleton hoped the Endurance would eventually free itself, but that never happened, and the pressure from the pack ice soon started to crush the vessel. He ordered his crew to abandon ship, and it wasn't long after they fled that it disappeared beneath the water's surface. For years, the wreck's location was a complete mystery. It was finally discovered in 2022, about 4 miles from where it first sank. For the past 106 years, it has sat on the cold, dark floor of the ocean at a depth of 10,000 or so feet. Locating the Endurance was a complicated task, to say the least. A team of experts spent over 2 weeks scouring the area with underwater drones while fighting off bitter cold temperatures and some of the world's iciest waters in hopes of finding any sign of the ship. As the researchers expected, the vessel was damaged. But it's still in remarkable shape for its age, owing largely to the frigid Antarctic conditions that helped preserve it. Because the sea is so cold, it lacks the wood-eating organisms that are known to destroy wrecks in other areas of the world. The sunken ship is considered a protected monument under the Antarctic Treaty and will remain at its current resting place for years to come. Number 8. SS Marine Sulphur Queen. Built in Pennsylvania in 1944, the SS Marine Sulphur Queen started its career as a T2 tanker that mainly carried fuel. It officially became the Sulphur Queen in 1960 when it was converted to hold molten sulfur. On February 2, 1963, the 504-foot-long ship left Beaumont, Texas with over 15,000 tons of sulfur and 39 crew members on board. About 2 days later, a crewman sent a radio message mentioning the vessel's coordinates in the waters south of Florida. At the time, they were caught up in a rough storm with almost 16-foot waves and strong winds reaching up to 53 miles per hour. Nobody ever saw or heard from the Sulphur Queen again after this, and its fate is a mystery even to this day. The ship was reported missing about 2 days after its last radio transmission, but no sign of it was ever discovered, and the search was eventually called off. Its disappearance is steeped in superstition regarding the infamous Bermuda Triangle mysteries, but a Coast Guard report found a handful of more rational reasons that could possibly explain the Sulphur Queen's disappearance. The ship was hardly seaworthy, if at all, and its sulfur tanks were prone to erupt in constant fires, which had a tendency to short out the electrical equipment. As a T2 tanker, it was susceptible to splitting at the keel, especially as it aged, and crew members had previously mentioned that the Sulphur Queen was heavily corroded before her demise. One sailor even described the vessel as a floating garbage can. Given its substandard condition, there's a distinct possibility that the ship met with disaster and plunged down to the sea floor. And while it's frustrating not to know exactly what happened to it, the likelihood of another explanation is slim to none. Number 7. The SS Hippocampus. The Great Lakes are famous for their fierce storms and the wide range of shipwrecks left in their wake, which are believed to total over 6,000. Many of these sunken vessels have never been found, including an American-built wooden transport and cargo ship known as the SS Hippocampus. It's notable not only for being named after a part of the brain, but because it was sailing only a few miles off Benton Harbor in Lake Michigan when it went down way back in September of 1868. The Hippocampus was on its way from St. Joseph, Michigan to Chicago with about 30 passengers and a cargo of fruit when it met heavy winds and high waters. According to official records, the vessel became increasingly hard to control. The captain ordered for the fruit to be dumped in an attempt to save face, but it failed to prevent the shipwreck. None of this was known in the immediate aftermath of the ship sinking. According to a newspaper article from not long after the disaster, the ship was overdue in Chicago, which was initially the biggest clue to suggest that something went wrong. 9 passengers and 17 crew members died, while 15 people managed to survive by clinging onto debris until another ship rescued them. It's possible that the wreck was salvaged in 1877, but at the same time, records aren't entirely clear. As far as we know, it's entirely possible that the Hippocampus is still in its dark, frigid gravesite at the bottom of Lake Michigan. Number 6. HMS Blenheim and HMS Java. Built for the British Royal Navy during the 1750s, the HMS Blenheim was an impressive 90-gun second-rate naval warship. The 176-foot-long vessel was created as part of a program to expand the Royal Navy's fleet before the 7 Years' War with France. But the project met major delays thanks to understaffing in the shipyard, and the ship didn't actually launch until 1761. The Blenheim famously participated in the Battle of Cape St. Vincent back in 1797. It was one of the first battles of the Anglo-Spanish War, which lasted over a decade and was one of the major French Revolutionary Wars. The conflict was still going on in 1801 when the vessel was demoted down to a third-rate ship. On January 2, 1807, the Blenheim left Madras in eastern India with 2 other boats. About a month later, in early February, it was separated from its accompanying vessels during a strong gale. One of the other ships, the Java, also went missing that day. When the Blenheim was last seen by one of its own off Madagascar, it was flying distress signals. About 2 weeks later, it was spotted again by a French frigate near the island of Rodriguez in the Indian Ocean. Soon, other ships reported seeing a vessel matching the Blenheim and the Java's descriptions near the island of Réunion. According to some reports, the ships had been put in for repairs and had set sail, only to never be seen again. The Blenheim, the Java, and their combined crews of around 870 men remain lost to this day. Their fate is a mystery that may never be solved. Number 5. SS Bannockburn. Before it was given to Great Britain as a World War I reparation, the SS Bannockburn was originally a German trading vessel. The ship then went to the Hudson Bay Company and regularly traveled between Scotland and Canada, doing business with local tribes. The steel-hulled steamer met its demise in 1931, when it was trapped by ice floes in the Canadian Arctic. After getting the captain's order to abandon ship, the crew waited for rescue nearby in a makeshift shelter. They lost sight of the Bannockburn during a blizzard, and when they woke up the next morning, it was gone entirely. The men simply assumed it had sunk, but to their surprise, an Inuit fisherman spotted the vessel about a week later. It was too damaged to salvage for parts, so the crew retrieved what little cargo and belongings they could and deserted the ship yet again. Many people claim to see the Bannockburn over the next few decades, earning it the nickname of the Arctic Ghost Ship. The last verified sighting happened about 320 miles north of the Arctic Circle in 1969 off the coast of Barrow, Alaska. Then, 37 years after being abandoned, the ship finally seemed to vanish. Nobody has seen it since. Deserted ships don't often linger in coastal areas for long. Usually they're swept out to sea by strong currents, and either way, they eventually rust and sink under the waves. The strangest thing about the Bannockburn is how long and how frequently people continue to see it. What's even more odd is that nobody has found any signs of the wreckage since it was last spotted. The Alaskan government started a search for the shipwreck back in 2006 as a last-ditch effort to locate it, but no traces of it have popped up, and it's probably safe to assume that unless it's found at the bottom of the ocean, the Bannockburn is gone for good. What do you think happened to the Bannockburn? Let us hear your theories in the comments down below. We love hearing from our viewers, and while you're there, be sure to subscribe to the channel. Number 4. The SS Pacific. Built in New York during 1850, the 223-foot-long wooden sidewheel steamer known as the SS Pacific first entered service at the height of the California Gold Rush. It carried out several historically valuable loads of gold during its first few years of service and during the Cassiar Gold Rush in British Columbia in the 1870s. During a routine voyage from Victoria, British Columbia to San Francisco back in 1875, the Pacific collided with a ship called the Orpheus off the Washington coast holding 275 passengers and a rumored cargo of gold worth approximately $7 million in today's currency. There's no way of knowing exactly what happened after the crash because only 2 people survived the tragedy. But it is known that the Pacific had a tough voyage leading up to the accident and that crew members filled some of the lifeboats with water to correct a tilt. The other lifeboats were inoperable, and the ship fell apart and sank within only a half hour. Most of the passengers either drowned or died from exposure and hypothermia. It's believed to be the deadliest disaster to ever happen off the Pacific Northwest coast. Many have tried to find the gold-laden wreck, but it stayed missing until late 2022, when a team led by Jeff Hummel located a sunken vessel that is believed to be the Pacific. A court granted exclusive salvage rights to the team, who plan to carry out excavations starting this year and ending in 2025. Their findings will hopefully confirm the wreck's identity as the Pacific and that it was carrying a massive amount of gold. Number 3. The Argo. A 120-foot tank barge called the Argo was built in Baltimore, Maryland in 1911. She spent her career mainly transporting fuel across the Great Lakes. Little is known about the Argo's ill-fated voyage in October of 1937, including where she left from and where she was actually headed. She sank northeast of Sandusky, Ohio during a brutal storm on Lake Erie. Only 2 people were on board when the vessel sank in Canadian waters off Pele Island. Thankfully, they both survived. According to official records, the Argo came to a rest at a depth of nearly 40 feet. In a hazard assessment from 2013, NOAA scientists said that the wreck was reportedly still leaking oil. As of 2012, the water in the area had a noticeable sheen that could be seen from overhead and could not be attributed to any modern ships. The NOAA has been able to confirm for sure whether the Argo is leaking today, and unfortunately, without an exact location, experts can only make an educated guess about the condition of the wreck and the hazards that it may still possess. Number 2. SS Waratah. Nicknamed Australia's Titanic, the SS Waratah was a 500-foot steamship that mysteriously vanished in 1909 with its 211-member crew while sailing in the Indian Ocean from Durban to South Africa. The wreck has never been located, and there's little to no evidence to suggest what even happened to it. One passenger who got off before the ship left Durban wrote that the Waratah seemed to be top-heavy, which seems like a bad omen in hindsight. It is known that the seas were rough the night the vessel went missing. Over the next few years, debris and suspected human remains were reported throughout the southern hemisphere, but none of the discoveries were officially confirmed to be from the Waratah itself. According to local legend, the ship encountered rough weather and was capsized by a rogue wave. But there are many other theories about what may have happened to the vessel, including the possibility that it sailed to the Antarctic Circle, where its crew and passengers died from both cold and starvation. The Waratah's disappearance has been described as one of the most baffling nautical mysteries of all time, and rightfully so. Number 1. The SS Bannockburn. The SS Bannockburn was a 19th century Canadian-built steel-hulled freighter that hauled cargo back and forth in the Great Lakes. It disappeared during a winter storm in 1902 while carrying a load of grain on Lake Superior. The crew of the vessel that last spotted the Bannockburn reported seeing no signs of distress, and nobody thought anything was wrong until the ship failed to reach its destination in a timely manner. The wreck and the 21 crew members' bodies were never discovered. The only evidence recovered consisted of an oar and a life preserver. Insurance underwriters concluded that the Bannockburn likely ran aground on a reef at Caribou Island, but nobody truly knows what happened to it or where it sank. Within 7 years of the vessel's disappearance, it developed a reputation as a ghost ship, earning it the nickname the Flying Dutchman of the Great Lakes. The Bannockburn was most commonly spotted during unsightly bad weather. Some of the people who saw apparitions of the vessel believed it helped guide them away from dangerous shoals. Others were less thankful and more frightened by the sight of the ghost ship. One of the most famous sightings happened back in 1947, when the crew of a freighter called the Walter A. Hitchinson claimed that a visibly aged ship charged at their vessel during a rough storm. The Hitchinson's captain narrowly avoided a collision with the phantom ship, and the crew watched on as the ghastly vessel crashed into some nearby rocks and was destroyed. The most recent Bannockburn sighting was reportedly as recent as 2016, when a film crew claimed to see 3 masts out in the distance while shooting a music video in Michigan.
6. Raising the Titanic. The Titanic, a tragic icon of maritime history, continues to rest on the ocean floor as an enduring reminder of its catastrophic sinking in 1912. Despite persistent imaginations and technological advances, there are compelling reasons why the Titanic will forever remain submerged in its watery grave. One of the main reasons lies in the ship's compromised structural integrity. The exposed steel on the upper bow, which was once part of the vessel's majestic superstructure, has grown brittle over time. Even the most ambitious engineering efforts would falter in attempting to lift this weakened steel using cranes, as noted by Daniel Stone in his work Sinkable: Obsession, the Deep Sea, and the Shipwreck of the Titanic. Additionally, the mud surrounding the Titanic acts as a treacherous deep-sea quicksand that has effectively anchored the ship to the seafloor for a century. The ship's interaction with the elements and the ocean's currents has also resulted in the formation of rusticles, fragile formations resembling stalactites that continue to weaken the Titanic's structure. The Titanic's historical significance and the profound loss of life represents a crucial role in its preservation. Approximately 1,500 lives were tragically lost in the disaster, and the shipwreck serves as a maritime memorial. The US government and Britain have jointly agreed to uphold the Titanic's status as a memorial site, guided by the Agreement Concerning the Shipwrecked Vessel RMS Titanic. As a result, the wreckage is treated with reverence, and efforts to raise it are viewed as potentially disturbing the resting place of those who perished. In addition, ethical considerations have arisen due to the potential presence of human remains within the wreckage. While some argue that the passage of time and the corrosion effects of saltwater and marine life have likely led to the decomposition of these remains, the matter remains contentious. Renowned filmmaker James Cameron, who's explored the site himself, claims to have encountered no human remains, but still, debates persist. Descendants of the Titanic victims and survivors view the wreck as a sacred site, further cementing its role as a memorial rather than an object for salvage. Technological and financial challenges compound the unlikelihood of raising the Titanic. Ambitious plans have been proposed since engineer Charles Smith's 1914 concept of using electromagnetic cables to lift the ship, something that was estimated to cost $1.5 million back then. Adjusted for inflation, this would amount to roughly $45 million today. Comparatively, the salvage of the partially submerged Costa Concordia in 2013 cost a staggering $800 million. Considering the Titanic's complete submersion and weakened state, the technical complexity and financial burden of any such endeavor would be insurmountable. While some artifacts have been recovered from the wreckage's debris field, strict regulations and ethical considerations guide salvage efforts. Despite these, though, the Titanic's exposure to air can have detrimental effects on its preservation. The process of raising even a portion of the ship, as seen with the big piece of the Titanic's hull that was raised in 1998, involves intricate conservation efforts to prevent rapid deterioration due to the shift from a low-oxygen environment to one rich in oxygen. The Titanic's fate as a submerged relic is irrevocably tied to its deteriorated structure, historical significance, ethical implications, and monumental challenges associated with any salvage attempts. 5. Deep Sea Mapping. In May 2023, a groundbreaking achievement unveiled an unprecedented view of the Titanic, one of history's most iconic shipwrecks. Using advanced technology developed by Magellan Limited, a pioneering deep-sea mapping company, scientists have crafted the first-ever full-size digital scan of the Titanic. Situated 12,500 feet, 3,810 meters underwater, and 400 nautical miles, 741 kilometers off Newfoundland's coast, the Titanic's enormous size and remote location have hindered comprehensive examination until now. The digital twin offers an exact replica of the entire wreck, including the bow and stern sections that separated upon sinking, as well as the expansive 3x5 mile, 5x8 kilometer debris field. This photorealistic 3D model, according to Gerhard Seifert, a 3D capture specialist, allows unprecedented insights into the ship's entirety. Former limitations capturing the wreck's immense scale and intricate details have now been overcome. Jeremy Wyrick, director of the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration's Ocean Exploration Program, who's visited the site, emphasizes the immense challenges of exploring the Titanic's depth, darkness, and dimensions. The new imagery offers a compelling sense of scale, complementing previous lower-tech attempts at depicting the wreck. The project involved deploying submersibles named Romeo and Juliet to capture scans of every part of the wreck site, adhering to regulations prohibiting physical contact. The resulting dataset, generating 16 terabytes of data, along with over 715,000 still images and 4K video footage, constitutes a remarkable milestone in underwater exploration. Experts in both Titanic history and deep-sea exploration praise this achievement, foreseeing its potential to unravel lingering mysteries surrounding the Titanic and contribute to the study of other underwater sites. The model is deemed a game changer by Park Stevenson, a longtime Titanic explorer and analyst, indicating its transformative role in the future of underwater exploration. The digital twin also carries immense value in marine archaeology, offering insights into the preservation of shipwrecks like the Titanic, especially as it serves as a maritime memorial site. The lessons learned from its deterioration and the impact of visits could shape strategies for the preservation of other wrecks worldwide. Ultimately, the unveiling of the digital twin is more than just an advancement in Titanic research. It's a pivotal moment, marking a transition from the current generation of Titanic exploration to the next. This technological leap fosters new ways of understanding history and ocean exploration, and has the potential to inspire future generations to delve into the mysteries of the deep. What other underwater sites would you like there to be 3D models made of? Let us know in the comments below. And while you're at it, subscribe to the channel. 4. Cold War secret revealed. In July 2023, Business Insider shed light on the intriguing backstory of the discovery of the Titanic wreckage, which was deemed a remarkable maritime achievement at the time. The ship's wreckage, lying deep beneath the Atlantic Ocean, has captured the world's imagination since its tragic sinking in 1912. However, it wasn't until 1985 that the technology and circumstances aligned to locate and explore the iconic ship. During that pivotal year, renowned American oceanographer Robert Ballard, in collaboration with French oceanographer Jean-Louis Michel, unexpectedly stumbled upon the Titanic while on a mission to find two lost nuclear submarines, the USS Scorpion and the USS Thresher. Ballard, a Navy officer, had secured funding from the U.S. Navy in 1982 to develop advanced submersible technology to locate the Titanic. And to justify the funding, the Navy mandated that the mission primarily focus on the missing submarines, which had sunk in 1963 and 1968, making them the only nuclear submarines the Navy had lost. The Navy's initial intention was to employ Ballard's new submersible technology to investigate the submerged submarines and ascertain whether external forces were responsible for their sinking. Only if time permitted and the submarine's fate was clarified could Ballard's team explore the Titanic. The ship's discovery occurred by chance, with only 12 days left in the mission. Ballard followed a hunch that the ship had broken in two upon sinking, leaving a debris trail. This strategy proved successful, leading to the Titanic's remarkable rediscovery. The Navy, however, became anxious about the public attention that might reveal the true nature of the mission, fearing that Ballard's endeavors to locate the Titanic could be uncovered. But public focus on the Titanic's legendary story conveniently averted such suspicions. Years later, in 2008, Ballard publicly disclosed the dual purpose of the mission, unveiling that the expedition's primary goal was to locate the missing submarines. He shared this revelation in his book, The Discovery of the Titanic, providing insights into the complexities of the mission and the excitement of the discovery. The finding of the Titanic, initially concealed within the context of searching for lost submarines, stands as a testament to the interplay of history, technology, and chance. It emphasizes the intricate and often unexpected ways in which human endeavors can intersect, ultimately leading to the uncovering of hidden treasures beneath the ocean's depths. 3. Lost treasures. Speaking of treasure, did you know that there was an estimated $200 million worth of valuables that were lost to time in the sinking of the Titanic? In 1912, the Titanic, advertised as unsinkable, met its tragic end by colliding with an immense iceberg, claiming over 1,500 lives and consigning numerous treasures to the ocean depths. And remarkably, even after 111 years, ongoing exploration continues to uncover new artifacts from the historic shipwreck. Among these discoveries is an extraordinary gold necklace featuring a tooth from the megalodon, a massive extinct shark species that once grew up to 60 feet, 18.2 meters in length, far surpassing even the largest modern great white sharks. This remarkable find, captured in images taken by Magellan Limited in June of 2023, showcases the potential for 3D digital scans to preserve artifacts in their underwater context. The Titanic sinking also saw the loss of 5 Steinway pianos, which were securely fastened to the ship's floors. Despite years of submersion, remnants of these pianos likely endure, reflecting Steinway & Sons' long legacy of crafting prized instruments. An 1814 painting titled La Circassienne au Bain by Mary Joseph Blondel, valued at $3 million today, also met its demise on the Titanic. Depicting a nude woman bathing in an ancient setting, the artwork remains one of the most valuable items believed to have sunk with the ship. Compensation claims made by survivors following the tragedy shed light on the diverse range of lost possessions. Among the sought-after items was a rare pink diamond valued at $20,000, belonging to Mrs. Charlotte M. Cardezza. Such diamonds, incredibly scarce and exorbitantly priced today, represent a fraction of the personal treasures consigned to the ocean depths. A unique artifact with a cinematic link to the Titanic is a vintage 1912 Renault car, believed to have belonged to William Carter, a survivor of the disaster. Housed at Illinois' Volvo Museum, this automobile is the sole known car to have been on the Titanic during its ill-fated journey. While it remains uncertain whether the car can be salvaged after a century submerged in salt water, it serves as a powerful symbol of the tragedy. Despite the passage of time, the Titanic's watery grave continues to yield priceless artifacts that offer glimpses into the lives and times of those aboard this iconic ship. 2. The Last Survivor. Milvina Dean's connection to the Titanic began at just 9 weeks old, when she, her parents, and her older brother embarked on the ill-fated voyage in 1912. As the youngest passenger aboard, her presence on the Titanic was the result of unforeseen circumstances. Originally slated for a different ship, the family's plans shifted due to a coal strike, leading them to board the Titanic. Bound for Kansas City, Missouri to join her father's cousin, the Dean family's journey took a tragic turn on April 14, 1912, when the Titanic struck an iceberg. Milvina, her mother, and her 2-year-old brother survived, but her father was among the many who perished during the tragedy. Milvina made a bold statement in 2002, suggesting that her father's intuition about the ship's collision may have saved their lives. The family found refuge on Lifeboat 10, and were eventually rescued by the RMS Carpathia, while her father was among the victims who didn't make it onto lifeboats. Surviving the ordeal, Milvina, along with her brother, received education support from the Titanic Relief Fund. The White Star Line, which owned the Titanic, initially evaded responsibility for the disaster, but later offered compensation to the victims' families. Milvina, who only learned the full extent of the disaster at age 8, dedicated her life to sharing her unique story. She participated in Titanic exhibitions, spoke at schools, and met with the public to keep the memory of the tragedy alive. Milvina's reluctance to watch movies about the Titanic due to the connection with her father's fate showcased the emotional complexity of her experience. In her later years, Milvina auctioned off Titanic memorabilia to cover expenses, receiving support from Titanic director James Cameron and its stars, Kate Winslet and Leonardo DiCaprio. She passed away in 2009 at the age of 97, becoming the last living survivor of the Titanic sinking. Her ashes were scattered at Southampton docks, the point of departure for the ship's fateful journey in 1912. Milvina's life became a testament to the enduring impact of the Titanic's tragic legacy, a reminder of the lives lost and the stories that persist across generations. 1. Mystery solved. Beneath the depths of the North Atlantic Ocean, where the Titanic's colossal wreck lies, a captivating revelation has emerged that adds an intriguing layer to the enigma. Recent reports from CNN highlight that the Titanic's presence at the ocean's floor, fragmented into 2 parts, is not the sole secret concealed in its watery grave. An enigmatic sonar blip, detected almost 3 decades ago, has led to an astonishing discovery that transcends the boundaries of expectation. P.H. Narjolet, a seasoned submersible pilot and explorer of the Titanic's mysteries, originally identified the sonar blip through echo-sounding equipment in 1996. Yet, the origins of this signal remain shrouded in mystery. In a daring expedition in early 2022, Narjolet, accompanied by a team of 4 researchers, ventured to the coordinates of the blip to unveil the curious object it represented. The magnitude of the blip led Narjolet to anticipate a potential shipwreck, only to stumble upon an extraordinary rocky reef adorned with diverse volcanic formations. This newfound ecosystem thrives with life, including lobsters, deep-sea fish, sponges, and ancient coral species, some potentially dating back thousands of years. Murray Roberts, a distinguished professor of applied marine biology and ecology at the University of Edinburgh, commented on the profound implications of this discovery. He noted that this intricate ecosystem holds distinct fauna that diverge from the conventional inhabitants of the abyssal ocean, rendering it biologically captivating. The term abyssal plain denotes the ocean floor's expanse at depths ranging from around 9,843 to 13,123 feet, 3,000 to 4,000 meters, covering a significant 60% of the Earth's surface. Historically, it was viewed as a barren, featureless, and muddy seabed, one that lacked structure. However, rocky formations sporadically observed on the plain have intrigued scientists, and the recent revelation near the Titanic's vicinity by Roberts and his team suggests that such features might be more prevalent than previously presumed. Beyond its captivating beauty, this newfound rocky terrain holds clues to another long-standing mystery: the remarkable distances sponges and corals traverse across the ocean floor. Traditionally, the lack of solid surfaces within the muddy environment posed a conundrum for their growth and reproduction. But the emergence of these rocky stepping stones might offer an explanation. The researchers, presently engrossed in the analysis of images and videos from their dive, are poised to share their findings with the scientific community. Roberts envisions connecting this revelation with a broader initiative, the I-Atlantic Project, to deepen understanding and safeguard the delicate ecosystem within the newfound reef. Amidst these revelations, an intriguing mystery remains: another sonar blip adjacent to the Titanic, awaiting identification in a future expedition. As Nargeolet embarks on further explorations, the mysteries of the deep sea continue to captivate and enthrall. Supported by OceanGate Expeditions and their foundation, which played a pivotal role in funding Nargeolet's recent dive, the exploration saga goes on. The USS Indianapolis and the War in the Pacific. The USS Indianapolis was a U.S. warship during World War II. Built in Camden, New Jersey, it was launched in 1931. It was 610 feet, or 186 meters long, and was outfitted with 8-inch, or 20-centimeter guns, and 5-inch, 12-centimeter anti-aircraft guns. The Indianapolis was used in the Pacific Theater and became the flagship of the U.S. Fifth Fleet back in 1943. The warship was involved in the 1945 bombardment of Iwo Jima, a Japanese island that had critical importance. Control of Iwo Jima put the US and Allied forces only 750 miles, or 1,207 kilometers from Japan. B-29 bombers were eventually sent to the island so they could start a bombing campaign in Japan. Air power seemed to be the answer because around 500,000 lives were estimated to be lost if the US tried a full-scale land assault of the island. Although bombing campaigns in Japan were successful, the Japanese had no plans to surrender, even when Germany had already surrendered to the Allies. By the summer of 1945, the US government realized they'd have to step things up in order to defeat their enemy. The first nuclear weapon was successfully detonated in July 1945 during a test in the New Mexico desert. Later that month, the USS Indianapolis set sail to San Francisco to pick up cargo. Captain Charles B. McVay III was the commanding officer on this mission. He had officially been the commander of the ship since November 1944. It is unknown who on the USS Indianapolis actually knew what was in the cargo, but it contained parts for an atomic bomb. From San Francisco, the USS Indianapolis went across the sea to the island of Tinian, north of Guam. The atomic bomb parts were assembled on Tinian and later became the infamous bomb dropped on Hiroshima in August 1945. The fateful mission. From Tinian, the USS Indianapolis sailed west to the Leyte Gulf in the Philippines. The trip covered an estimated 1,300 miles, or 2,092 kilometers. They planned to join up with the fleet at Leyte Gulf and prepare for an invasion of Japan. About 1,196 people were on the USS Indianapolis. The trip was not an easy one, since the USS Indianapolis was not equipped with sonar to detect submarines. Some who have studied the ship believe Captain McVay followed a zigzag rule to avoid enemy subs, but did not follow orders to their full extent. Around 10:30 p.m. on July 29, 1945, the USS Indianapolis was halfway to the Leyte Gulf when a Japanese sub, the I-58, attacked. Under the command of Iko Hashimoto, the submarine fired 3 to 6 torpedoes, but only 2 hit the USS Indianapolis. One torpedo damaged the bow. It hit an area of the ship holding fuel containers. The second was a direct hit in an area called the powder magazine, where gunpowder was kept. Smoke and fire engulfed the ship as water quickly poured in. The USS Indianapolis was seriously damaged, and the crew had only minutes to evacuate. McVeigh reportedly told the ship's navigator to call for help, but the torpedoes took out the ship's power, rendering all the radios useless. An order was sent out to abandon ship. McVeigh remembered that the ship rolled over to a full 90 degrees before everything became a chaotic mess. The captain found himself washed away and battered by water. He later told the press in 1945, "Next thing I noticed was a crate of potatoes. I got astride, then came across part of a wooden desk. I saw 2 life rafts within 20 feet, or 6 meters, with nobody aboard. I got one, then secured the other." It took 12 minutes for the ship to sink, and it's believed about 900 men went into the water that fateful night. The USS Indianapolis was about 300 miles, or 483 kilometers from land. Staying alive. Those that survived the torpedoes were now caught in a living nightmare. Life vests were worn by some sailors, while others were lucky enough to be inside life rafts. Those without vests struggled in the waters as they desperately tried to cling to debris. It was all they had to stay afloat in the Pacific. Some of the men were injured, burned, and bleeding. The explosion from the USS Indianapolis and all of the blood soon caught the attention of nearby sharks. The oceanic white-tip shark did most of the hunting in those waters. Weighing in at 370 pounds, 168 kilograms, and measuring close to 10 feet, 3 meters in length, the oceanic white-tip shark is a feared predator with powerful jaws. These sharks feed on other sharks, squid, tuna, and marlin. On July 29th, they had something else to feast on. Ensign Harlan Twimble was one of their victims. He would later state in an interview, "Everybody was scared to death. These were all 18 and 19-year-old kids. There wasn't any fighting, any turmoil," he said. But everybody was scared. Twimble was in the water and worked with survivors to form tight packs so they could watch out for sharks. Survivors were under the impression that help was only a few hours away and that they wouldn't be in the water for very long. The white-tip sharks attacked and killed an unknown number of men. Some died of complications from their injuries or from dehydration. Twimble remembered that they were successful at scaring off the sharks or fighting them off sometimes. Not every moment was a victory, though. This went on for 4 agonizing days straight. Rescue seemed like a bygone dream at this point. Survivors reportedly pushed out the remains of those who died out into the waters ahead to distract the sharks. The sight of the dead was too much for them to bear. Some even refused to be near the wounded for fear that their blood would lure more sharks. Those that were injured had to have been in agony due to the salt and fuel in the water. It was absolute torture for the survivors, but they were not free from the dangers of the sharks. One survivor later told the BBC in 2013 that he saw dozens of sharks in the area. They also told the BBC, "In that clear water, you could see the sharks circling. Then, every now and then, like lightning, one would come straight up and take a sailor and take him straight down. One came up and took the sailor next to me. It was just somebody screaming, yelling, or getting bit." It was reported that survivors found food rations from the Indianapolis floating in the water. A few cans of food were successfully opened, but that also attracted sharks. Survivors decided it was better to starve instead of fight the beasts. Those that ate the food quickly realized it was heavy in sodium, which caused increased thirst. The men had no access to safe drinking water for days. Fear gripped some of the men so much so that they simply refused food or drink. Some food was kept on rafts and was handed out to soldiers. Canisters of drinking water were eventually found, but unfortunately, they were too heavy to put on the rafts. If opened, the water would get contaminated by the ocean, making them unsafe to drink. First aid kits were also available, but they had been damaged by water, making them practically useless. One physician was remembered by a survivor for swimming from sailor to sailor to check who was still living. If you're enjoying this story, please like and subscribe to this channel. Also, hit that bell for notifications. The situation was dire. One man who survived told the press in 1945 that by the fourth day, survivors would scream and holler, and pretty soon the screams would be mixed with the gurgles. Another man noted that the life vests lost their buoyancy after 48 hours, and that made the situation even worse, as men struggled to keep their heads above the waves. It was also reported that some started fighting with each other to get extra life vests to stay afloat. They were all inching closer towards death, with no rescue planes or ships in sight. During the day, the heat and blinding sun added to the misery and pain of those who were lucky enough to survive. The night was cold and utterly miserable. The water temperatures may have been about 85 degrees, but some experienced a drastic drop in their body temperatures, leading to hypothermia. The salt water from the sea mixed with the fuel from the ship blinded others. Their days were painful and nerve-wracking. Sadly, some of the fights among the sailors turned deadly. It is possible that up to 24 men died from these spats. Madness had taken over other survivors. A few were even claiming that they were back home at their favorite bar. Some made the fateful decision to drink seawater and give in to their thirst, but became victims of salt poisoning. In these cases, people have to drink fresh water in order to flush out the salt. Sadly, in the case of the USS Indianapolis, those who drank the ocean water ended up drinking more and more to cure the unquenchable thirst created by salt poisoning, which only made things worse. Some hallucinated that they could see islands or the USS Indianapolis in the distance. One survivor said that a fellow sailor thought they were back on the ship. A few men opted to take the easy way out and release themselves from their life vests, ultimately drowning because they believed help would never come. The USS Indianapolis was not reported overdue for about 54 hours. It is believed that this is thanks to the secretive nature of the USS Indianapolis's mission. The men were found by accident when a Navy aircraft on a patrol mission spotted them in the water. The amphibious aircraft, a PBY Catalina, dropped rafts down to survivors, but the captain and crew of the plane decided to try an unbelievable rescue by landing their plane onto the water. They landed on the rough Pacific and were able to rescue some of the men. Some survivors latched onto the wings of the plane with parachute cords to survive. An estimated 56 sailors from the USS Indianapolis were saved by this plane. A destroyer, the USS Cecil Doyle, was one of many ships sent out for the rescue effort. 320 survived the ordeal. 4 men died in hospitals after the incident, lowering the total to 316 survivors. The aftermath. By December 1945, McVeigh was court-martialed and accused of negligence. He was the only captain of a ship lost during World War II that received this punishment. He was accused of not following the zigzag pattern to avoid enemy submarines, and he was accused of failing to have sailors properly abandon the USS Indianapolis after it was torpedoed. McVeigh lost seniority after being convicted. It was reported that he was even listed as a felon in certain states due to the court-martial. His sentence was later remitted, but his reputation was already beyond repair. Survivors met for reunions in Indianapolis, Indiana. Those who served under McVeigh saw him as a scapegoat for what they perceived as Navy negligence. They did not blame him for what happened to the USS Indianapolis, but praised his bravery and leadership in a difficult situation few have ever faced. The weight of the criticism McVeigh faced, along with the death of his wife in 1961, led him to take his own life just years later in 1968. It was later discovered that 3 SOS signals were sent from the USS Indianapolis. All 3 were rumored to have been completely ignored. One rumor said that a drunk officer received one of the signals, but mishandled the situation. Sadly, that information is long gone or buried in decades worth of bureaucratic paperwork. McVeigh was fully absolved in 2001 when Congress overturned the verdict from his court-martial. Researchers successfully found the wreckage of the USS Indianapolis in August 2017. Survivors were awarded Congressional Gold Medals in 2020, 75 years after their ship sank in the Pacific. Strangely enough, the USS Indianapolis is the only U.S. warship sunk by a Japanese submarine and was the last major ship sunk during the entirety of World War II. Official records do not indicate how many men on the USS Indianapolis died from shark attacks. One believed anywhere from 24 to 150 men were victims of sharks. Those who survived and were interviewed all agree that sharks were hunting the survivors after the USS Indianapolis sank. These survivors lasted 4 days adrift in the ocean with little to no food or water. To this day, the story of the USS Indianapolis is considered one of the worst shark attack incidents in history. Hopefully, this incident will never be topped. Do you think you could have survived the sinking of the USS Indianapolis? What would you have done to make it out alive? Comment below and let us know. Theo, be sure to subscribe.